Hello, Brian. Welcome. Could you please tell me who you are
Yeah, my name's Brian Doyle, and I'm currently working for the Flow Foundation in a DevRel role focused primarily on developer education.
and what does Flow do?
So, Flow is the L1 blockchain created by the same team that built CryptoKitties, and the chief architect is Dieter Shirley, who is the proposer for ERC 721 and the coiner of the phrase non-fungible token or NFT.
One thing that I think is pretty unique about Flow is how you guys have managed to reach multiple large American organizations like the NBA, Microsoft. Maybe you can explain why that is the case, like how you guys managed to find your niche.
So I can give a partial answer to that and clarify a few things. Like a lot of organizations, the origin story of Flow, has turns and goes in different directions. So Dapper Labs was created as a company to manage CryptoKitties after its success, which interestingly enough, it actually started as a ETH Global Hackathon project in the ETH Global Waterloo in 2018, if I remember correctly. So you never know what one of those are going to turn into. But Dapper as a company realized that, when CryptoKitties broke ETH mainnet with the amount of traffic, that was only 14,000 daily active users, which is not really enough to have a sustainable product for a big company. And so they decided that they needed a different network. And after reading every white paper that was available, decided to build their own. So Dapper Labs built the Flow network, and then Flow itself was spun out as an independent nonprofit, I believe at the beginning of last year. Again, I joined in October, so some of the dates of the history I wasn't there for. And so we're, of course, still very closely partnered with Dapper. They're the biggest builder in our ecosystem, and we talk to them regularly. And in terms of why they picked Dapper, again, I wasn't there for it, but I imagine it that, if you're the NBA, if you're Disney, if you're one of these big, big brands and you decide you want to venture into the world of Web3 and digital collectibles, you can pick whoever you want. And picking the people who invented NFTs is probably a good choice for who's going to build your NFT collection for you.
And how has Flow changed since then? I saw that you guys recently set up EVM compatibility. I've noticed that, you've done a pretty good job at hackathons and all these like global events. It's actually something that a lot of people have told me personally, and I really agree with it. I think you guys have done a good job at that. But how has the company grown, and like what is it currently?
So it's great to hear that. We've seen that or observed that as well, but it's nice to hear from the outside. As you of course know, crypto is a very volatile industry. It has its ups and downs, and NBA Top Shots was one of the leads in the 2021 bull run. And it was very successful for Dapper, but it is an open and public network. But the benefit and cost of Flow as it was originally built is it also comes with a new programming language, which is called Cadence, which is the only smart contract programming language built by app developers and people who have written smart contracts to build apps to have a better way of doing things than all of the pitfalls and frightening hidden secrets of Solidity and the EVM like reentrancy. And so the team built this magical island where the cars fly, even though they only cost $60,000 and get 300 miles to the gallon, but it's out in the middle of the ocean. And no one wants to go swimming. And so culminating with the release of Crescendo last October, the team added full EVM equivalents basically by running EVM in a smart contract, or you can think of it as like a container or an emulator on our network. And that builds a bridge to the rest of the on-chain world. And as a result of that, we've been able to attract a large amount of builders with what I believe we can make a very strong argument is also the best implementation of EVM in existence. And so that allows, builders to come and test the waters with what they're familiar with. You can deploy your existing Solidity contracts on Flow EVM, just like you can on any other EVM equivalent network, and expect them to work the same, except for spending 30 million gas cost less than a tenth of a penny without compromising on security or safety. And so as a result of that and the efforts that we've built around that, we've been very successful. For a large part of the year, as reported by Masari, I believe I should know this, we're the fastest growing L1 by number of developers in the East New York, which we just got back from. We were not only the most hacked upon network, but the most hacked upon partner. We had a huge number of hackers build on Flow, and even we were very excited that 4 out of the 10 overall ETH Global chosen finalists built on Flow.
So I've actually used Cadence. I've written it in a hackathon. We built a project for storing like profiles at companies or schools or whatever. It wasn't that bad. So to say that, because what I say, why I coded in maybe like 7 or 8 different languages throughout my career, JavaScript being the best, easiest, with C being the most difficult, and using Cadence was pretty decent. I really liked that. I think I was doing the hackathon in 2023, and you had this AI playground where you don't have it anymore. I don't think. At least the last time I checked, I didn't. But you had an AI playground where I could just say what I want and it writes the code for me, and that was such a great thing, and it was so early as well. Yeah, that was very impressive. But it was decent in that it was easier to learn than I think Solidity. It had a lot less, I don't know, weird pitfalls, like you said. But how is that for you?
So, yeah, Solidity is almost like a terrifying version of chess, where it's easy to learn and it takes a lifetime to master all of the way that you can lose millions of other people's money. One of the things that I'm kind of really working on now with the focus on education is onboarding people to Cadence, and the best way to do it. What we're really starting to realize with talking to hackers over the last 6 months, and talking to other people, is that we need to honestly do a better job describing what Cadence is, because naturally, and when you ask someone to learn a new programming language and they think that they can already do something, do that thing in a programming language that they already know, it's a really hard sell, even if it is better, because people imagine like, well, let's say the language is twice as good as the one that I'm doing right now. It's still going to take me like 5 years to get to the break-even point when I'm an expert on the first language, right? But the thing about Cadence is that it's a fundamentally different paradigm for programming smart contracts that's made specifically for writing applications. And so it's, when you come into it from a Solidity perspective, it's almost worse than coming in fresh with no knowledge of smart contracts, because again, the ideas are fundamentally different. In Solidity, if you make a token, then all of everyone's money is just in a pile in a room somewhere. And if someone figures out a way to get into that room, they can take all of everyone's money right away at one time. But Cadence is designed so that your assets are in a file structure in your account. And so programmers can still make mistakes. There can still be vulnerabilities, but if a vulnerability is discovered, the attacker has to go and rob everyone in their house individually, one at a time, instead of just being able to go to one place and pull up a dump truck and load it all up. And so that gives a lot more time to fix everything, and it gives a lot more of a logical understanding and handling of where things are and how they work. And so it's much harder in Cadence to make mistakes where you accidentally give someone's assets to someone else, or you accidentally duplicate or destroy an asset, because the whole language is designed around the idea of resources. And a resource is a new type of data structure specifically for representing digital property. And this is a very much a simplification of it, but the basic idea is, in a normal programming language, if you say variable A equals 1, variable B equals A, console log B, it'll print out 1, and console log A, it'll print out 1, as you would expect. But with a resource, if you say variable A equals 1, variable B equals A, console log B, it will still print out 1. And if you console log A, it'll say error, A does not exist anymore. Because rather than copying what is in A and putting it in B, you have moved what is in A and what is in B. And that works between accounts too.
It reminds me a lot of the Rust and borrow checker. So that was, when I was writing it, I think that was the closest resemblance I had in terms of like, how do I ground myself, right? Because I actually had to deal with that a lot, and it was very intuitive for me, where yeah, the whole borrowing thing was not, so it's not, you don't call it borrowing. So like I would move things and then I wouldn't realize that I'm moving them. And but what that forced me to do is get it right before I deployed. So I couldn't actually deploy until I did that correctly, which was good. I think there's a lot of good things about it. But you as a DevRel, the fact that you're dealing with all these people that are trying to build on top of your tool, a lot of them are probably newer. Um, Even the ones that are not newer are still new, given that young environment. How does that feel like for you? Did you do DevRel as a job before Flow?
Yeah, I've had an eclectic career. I've done a bunch of different things. I guess you can look at my LinkedIn if you really care, but I've worked kind of in the intersection of video games, education, and programming for, I don't know, the last 15 years or so. And so my path into DevRel, which I've learned almost everyone who ends up in DevRel has a curious and eclectic career, but I had been doing online coding boot camps for a while. I taught at one, and then I managed the project portion of that. And then I was the head of the curriculum for another. And that is a really cool industry, and it's really sad, what's happened with that, with, the rest of the economy over the last few years. But I decided I needed something new, and I wanted to see if I could find a way for, to get a job where I could get paid to either learn AI or learn crypto. And I found my way into Coinbase, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed working at Coinbase, including at the beginning. But at the beginning, I learned very quickly that, back then, before the growth of L2s, before the existence of Base, Coinbase was mostly a traditional finance company. But as the industry evolved, and as L2s came to exist, and as Base was born, I went from working on our external facing education for crypto and how to build smart contracts to doing that for Base and working in DevRel on Base. And then I did that for a while, and then found my way to Flow.
And how is it being a DevRel? Because I would say like I kind of did DevRel as well for a while. The reason for me is that I'm just a bit like infinitely curious, and I just want to learn new things constantly. And I love working in quote unquote emergent tech. So this is kind of the only thing that actually makes sense when people say it. Because you see AI, you see blockchain, and they're very separate things, but really they're in the same category of like new technology. Even if it's 10 years old or whatever, it's still like new tech. And that's kind of what I love doing. I would say mostly I'm a dev, but I've done all of it. How is it being a DevRel in a space that's like so nascent with a programming language that's so nascent? And yeah, it's a strange world and ecosystem that we work in.
Yeah, well, it's a cool field, and I would say, a lot of fields like this, and a lot of fields in tech are like this anyway, where it is pretty individual. It is pretty specific. And even within the same organization, we've got, let's see, let me let me count. At Flow, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 4. Counting is hard. But we've got 4 of us, 5 of us. I know I was not counting right. 5 of us working full time in DevRel, and we all kind of have different roles and subspecialties with it. And you'll see that it was the same way with the Base team, where there's like my sort of niche and overlap is I am very much on the technical side. I could be a full-time engineer if I wanted to, and if life led me in that way. And I know quite a bit about education and the science of learning. And so my focus is mostly on building technical demos, figuring out how things work, and being that bridge from like the engineering teams that produce the libraries, and teaching, being the person who writes the thing that you read to find out how this works, which I like a lot. It's really fun. It's really interesting. And it's kind of like, the downside, but the whole reason for my job is every time I want to learn something new, I can't read how it works because I'm the one who writes how it works a lot of the time. Although, of course, our engineers produce a lot of documentation, which is very important and very helpful. But then it's my job to convert that into a learning experience that lets other developers more quickly, more easily get how all of the pieces fit together. And then I have other colleagues who are more focused on social elements of it, are focused on meeting people in the community, talking to builders, figuring out what their needs are, and passing that on to me, passing that on to the engineering team. And again, not that I don't do those things too. There's a lot of overlap. We all do everything a little bit, but there's kind of, in this field, there's usually a lot of flexibility and sort of different zones that you can focus on because I like it. It's interesting. Every day is new. Everything is different. You never know what's around the corner. I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to be building and working on 6 months from now because it probably doesn't exist yet.
What's next in terms of flow, and what kind of trends do you see in the niche that you're working in?
So I'll start general and then I'll focus into flow itself. In general, I'm very excited about crypto. And one of the things that I've seen with tech is that it's a lot like science fiction, where the predictions of the future in the short term take a lot longer than people think they do, but in the long term, they happen a lot more quickly. The classic example would be if you've ever read 50s science fiction and the characters break out their slide rule to calculate the jump to hyperspace. And so that also means things happen in a different order. But crypto is, in blockchain or Web3 or on-chain or whatever you want to call it, it's right before the cusp of hitting mass market. And people don't realize how long these things usually take. Like you and I both have rectangles in our pockets. Almost everyone has a rectangle in their pocket. And if you ask most people, I think they would say that, pocket rectangles were invented with the iPhone. And that's not true at all. Pocket rectangles were invented in the late 80s by Apple with a personal digital assistant that fit in your pocket. And no one bought it because the pieces weren't there yet. The internet didn't exist, so it didn't have that. Cell phones only barely existed. You couldn't fit one in it. Battery technology wasn't good enough. You'd need to recharge it every hour, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it takes something like an average of 15 years for something like your pocket rectangle to go into something that has all of the pieces and components put together to become a mass market product. And some of that is the development of technology. Some of that is, the adoption process from people who are on the cutting edge and nerds and tech fans and evangelists. And part of that, and I think what we're still missing in crypto, is there's a couple of pieces that either we haven't figured out what they are and invented them, or we just haven't put them together in the right combination. With smartphones, it was that combination of telephone, text messaging machine, and pocket internet device. And with those pieces together, it suddenly becomes unstoppable. So I'm very excited with crypto. I've said for a long time, and certain people have disagreed with me about it, but I think it's 1993 if we're comparing it to the internet. It's right before it becomes everywhere, or it's 2003 if we're comparing it to smartphones. And so I'm really, really excited for that. More specifically with Flow, we're on the cutting edge of that. Our network, and again, maybe people will argue, maybe people will disagree, but the Flow protocol was designed by the people who invented NFTs, and in doing so broke Ethereum mainnet to make a network that would actually has a plan in place and is being built every day towards getting 1 billion people using this, to having millions of daily active users doing things that they want to do that are meaningful and useful. And so, the protocol team and the language team have been marching towards that goal for years now, building it without compromising on security, making it so that it is truly on chain and it's not just AWS with extra steps, and getting ready for that future. And right now, as of last week, I'm so excited about the 2 new things that we've released and are releasing, or in the process of releasing, in October with our Forte upgrade. And the first pieces of that are the most earth-shattering one from a point of computation is one of the simplest, but the protocol team has figured out how to safely and efficiently do scheduled transactions or scheduled callbacks on chain. And that's just loops. Making loops with your programs, which is such a basic computing thing, computational thing, that we can't actually do in blockchain, because the only way that you can make a computer that anyone is allowed to use and no one has admin powers and anyone can run any code, well, I'm sure every single programmer in existence, at least once in their life, has accidentally created an infinite loop. And that would crash the computer permanently for everyone without doing like a hard fork and rewinding some blocks or something. So we have gas limits, and transactions are only allowed to run in one block. But now with Flow, currently in our emulator, testnet should be in a couple of weeks, in mainnet in October, you can say, at this time, run this arbitrary amount of code and or run this transaction. But this is a cadence transaction, which, unlike Solidity, is not just one call to one function that already exists. It's any cadence code that you want to write that will execute to any functions, to any resources that the user has authorization for. And it can do anything, including creating another callback that says, hey, in 1 second, in 10 seconds, in 10 days, whatever makes sense for your use case, run this code, check this thing. And so that's going to let you do things like say, hey, I want to check the price of a token every single day. And if it's below a certain amount, I want to buy it. And if it's above a certain amount, I want to sell it. Or all kinds of crazy things like updating a game loop, pushing notifications potentially to users with connected to some front end things, and doing all of that entirely on chain. So you don't have to trust the private memory pool of a provider off chain who could be front running you or sandwiching you or doing who knows what else, or they could just go down. So I'm super excited about that. And then the harder to explain and harder to get, but even more powerful thing is flow actions. And starting with DeFi actions and DeFi primitives, flow actions are a new standard where Deet is writing smart contracts again. And when Deet writes smart contracts, things happen like NFTs get invented. And so now he's doing what NFTs did for digital collectibles for building apps that interface with DeFi protocols. And if you've ever worked with a DeFi protocol, they're all massively complicated. Even if they're a fork of Uniswap or something else well known, they tend to have very specific adjustments to it. You need to know magic commands and magic flags, and you need to have a lot of knowledge for how they work without. And a lot of times it's not documented, and you have to figure it out. And so what actions do is they create a layer between your program and any DeFi protocol that's you or someone else has created a connector for, and it's open and permissionless. Anyone can make connectors. And then it works like, the same way that your computer talks to your monitor. Your computer doesn't know or care how an LG monitor makes a pixel red, or a Samsung monitor makes a pixel red, or an Asus monitor makes a pixel red. All your operating system has to do is just say, hey, you, make that pixel red. And so with actions, you can say, hey, you, give me 25 tokens from this protocol. And it doesn't matter what protocol it is, what protocol you want to connect to, you write your app in the exact same way for all of these different protocols. And so it's going to make it so much easier to make apps that interact and connect all of these different protocols, because you don't have to learn the protocol to be able to add it to your app and be able to allow your customers to use it. You just use actions, and it makes it all much easier. And so the same way that you make an NFT according to a certain standard, it just shows up in all of these marketplaces. Now you can write your app, and with all of these connectors, these protocols just show up. You can just add them easily for your use.
Would this be backwards compatible, right? So, or is this like a new standard that everybody has to agree to, that you bake into the what? I don't know if it's probably not called the Cadence virtual machine, but whatever it is, like the translation, the underlying layer of the network. Two is this like some kind of mapping that you do up front? So you have like, I don't know, some layout that maybe Flow provides themselves, where they just lay out all of these different applications, create this intermediary layer. And like, is this backed by any AI products that is able to figure this stuff out, or is it just like baked into the actual system?
Great questions, and I can go through all three of them. So first of all, yeah, it's absolutely backwards compatible. In terms of like existing protocols, it's designed to onboard existing and new protocols into the system through the connectors. And so the the connectors are the most complicated part of this, where the flow team is writing a lot of the major ones, but it's open and permissionless, so anyone who needs to or wants to can build other connectors. But the connector is the bridge between any and every legacy or active or current or future DeFi protocol to this system. And then once the connector is in existence, the connector is used to instantiate these actions. So like one of the most basic actions is a source. And a source is simply a place where you can get tokens from. And once you have a source, the instantiation is going to be different for each protocol, because different protocols require different types of authorization, different types of information for like maybe a pool number or an account number. But once you have that instantiated through the connector, then that action, the source action, has three functions. What type of token do you provide? Because in Cadence, tokens are a type. They're a part of the type system rather than just being an address, which may or may not even be a token at all. How many can you give me? And give me them. And so regardless of the protocol, those three functions are what exist in a source. And a sink is the opposite. What tokens do you take? How many am I allowed to give you? And let me give you some tokens. A swap is also very similar. It just has functions to, hey, can I swap these things? What are the balances? What would the fee be? And do the swap. Well, to reverse a little bit, one of the things that I've been working on, because I, like pretty much everyone everywhere, and particularly in DevRel, have been really focused on how do I make our products better and more effective with AI? And it turns out quite conveniently and perhaps unsurprisingly that the way that you make stuff better for AI is almost exactly the same as how you make it better for humans, which is having robust and complete documentation, having a lot of examples, having effective error messages in the programming language. But actions in particular, the thing that makes it great for humans is also the thing that makes it great for AI, because it simplifies and unifies it so dramatically. One of the things that I've been saying lately is, if you're a programmer and you've started working with AI as your part of your daily workflow, which you absolutely should be, and if you're not, you're doing it wrong. But if you're a programmer who works with AI every day, you should have absolutely no worry about your job security, because it's very clear that they still need us. They need us for different reasons, and we'll do slightly different things. But that's always been the case. The job of a programmer is to solve problems with computers, not to write a language or work with a library. It's to figure out.
I'm sorry for interrupting. This is like, so I'm so passionate about this. Yeah, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but there's like this. I think there's like a few different types of people in terms of how they view their career or job. Some people view it as an art, and those people are the ones that like they kind of want to write everything themselves. They want to design it all. They want to like all by hand. It's the same with people that make clothes by hand. But then you have like the people that are doing business, and then there are the people that are doing it competitively. It's just very interesting, like how you see it the same. And I think there's like a similarity there. Because some people that end up in DevRel are like, they're very like how do I get the thing done in as quickly as possible at the high quality. And I think that kind of makes fall into DevRel. I'm going off track here, but it's just something that I'm like so passionate.
I mean, tangents are good, and I'm glad you said that. And yeah, like I don't know. I mean, I guess I've met many people in DevRel who are like me, but like people ask me like, "Oh, can you recommend me a book, or can you have you read this book?" And it's like, I don't do that. I will read the chapter of the book that's useful to me when I'm solving a problem and gain great insights from that. But like, I don't. My brain is very problem focused, and figuring out like, what can we put the pieces together to do this? And that's like what I used to tell students at boot camps is like, new programmers in particular have this vision that a senior or staff or principal programmer are these like great wizards. They're like Merlins, and they have over their career accumulated this huge spell book. And you ask them like, oh, how do I make a calculator in React? And they say, oh, yes, I gained that spell early in my career. It's on page 4. Let me read from the tome. And that's not how it is at all. A programmer is like MacGyver. I've got some bubble gum and 2 paper clips. and I think I can pry open that pipe full that looks like it has natural gas. How can we get this door open? Although maybe not as exciting as MacGyver makes the explosion. But yeah. So with AI and with our jobs of solving problems with computers, AIs hallucinate a lot. They get confused a lot. And if you ask them to pull data from a website or an API, they keep trying to use Axios. And I'm like, hey, buddy, can we use Fetch, please? Come on. Or like, it's getting better now, but last year working with WAGMI with AI was incredibly frustrating or really useless because the AIs, were trained on either 1.0 or even pre 1.0 WAGMI and didn't understand how 2.0 WAGMI works. And so now imagine that kind of hallucination and the risk of that kind of hallucination when you're working with DeFi protocols, which are all incredibly complicated to begin with. And then they're all bespoke forks of the same protocol that's all very, very similar, but not exactly the same. And you have a tool that tends to confuse similar things and tends to, like you have to remind it, hey, AI buddy, remember we're using VM, we're not using ethers, and we're not using Web3.js. That code right there that you put in the file that we've been making all day using VM is ethers. And now apply that to trading or writing code to trade large amounts of money. It's a horrifying risk. And so what these actions do is they make it much, much safer for an AI to interact with your money, because all the AI has to do is figure out what connectors to use to invoke these actions, which will be well documented and make it easy for, humans and AIs to do. You just need to call this function with these parameters. And now you have a source of tokens with 3 functions in it. And the same 3 functions, regardless of the protocol, makes it much, much easier for an AI or humans to string these together to do exactly what they want. But then even better than that, in one of the most amazing features of Cadence is that the Cadence transactions, in addition to being able to run arbitrary code, and so you can create you're not even creating a contract usually with these actions. You're creating a transaction that interacts with several contracts at the same time, with one transaction, with one signature, even, swapping 2 tokens with just one line of code and one signature. No approves, no, I hope I'm only giving you access to a small amount of tokens and not my entire net worth. A very specific, safe, secure way of doing one line of code to swap 2 tokens. But they also have what are called pre and post conditions. And if those aren't met, the entire transaction unrolls itself. And so the precondition is the only part that's allowed access and authorization to do anything with your stuff. So you could write a transaction that says the precondition is you are allowed to take $20 of the flow token out of my account. And then once that's done and we're in the execution phase, the transaction is unable to touch any more of my assets other than those 20 tokens. And then the post phase, the post check is after all of this is done, I must own this NFT, or I must have a balance of this other token. And then in the middle, in the execute phase, you or the AI can do whatever you want safely. And a human doesn't need to be able to understand it. Like the joke I've been making lately is like, if the AI decides it needs to conquer Italy in that transaction to get you that NFT, it can do it with $20, then whatever, you don't need to worry about what's happening. And so it just makes it fundamentally safer to do these kinds of things than the current state of all of these, custom bespoke protocols that have naturally a tremendous amount of very obfuscated power to do things with your assets.
So I'm really interested in like tech side of this, especially in terms of like what differentiates all these chains. So I'm just going to represent like the perspective that I think is very valid, especially given that I've been like 7 years and I've seen like not as many, some people have seen more, but I've seen a lot of ups and downs, issues that come through with crypto. But you have all of these different layer ones that are essentially competing for a very small percent population. There's like 2 different sides. I think in the West, people are interested in it, like the global South, and the people need it because they don't have like currency or whatever. So you have like very different use patterns. But we have like an overabundance of networks and all this like stuff that people don't use. I'm not claiming flow is, because I've used it and I've seen the value in it personally, but there's just so much of it, and I don't think that there's like the balance between supply and demand is way off. So hearing about like how the tech differ is interesting for me, because when you look at a lot of these like layer ones, like there was one story, it was VC backed layer one. They got a bunch of money, I think $130 million over 6 years. They never really shipped anything. People that made it just kind of went on to the next thing. And this is just one of many, many layer ones. So hearing like specifically how the tech is different and what it's do is good to hear. And then maybe let's just touch like the last thing on flow is like, let's touch on the EVM compatibility. Why did you guys go this route? And what do you think benefit is? What's your opinion generally on like a cross-chain world?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, and I alluded to this at the beginning, and this is also all before me. I joined Flow October of last year, just a couple weeks after EVM went live, and so this is all secondhand and might have some, slight inaccuracies in it. But generally speaking, it was a subject of discussion for a long time, and I think that a lot of the team will own up and towards the idea that at the beginning they made the mistake that a lot of technically brilliant people make regularly, which is if we make something awesome, everyone will use it. And unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way, which is a shame. But it's something that we're quite honestly to this day trying to figure out like what to do and how to talk about it, because I'm really excited about about these new changes, and we're talking about them. But like I'm talking about full self-driving AI in my car, in our cars, when everyone else's car is comparable to a Model T. Like it's such a world of difference that it's actually cognitively difficult to understand, like just how much more is possible. I'm trying not, having been here a relatively short amount of time, like I came in and kept grabbing people and shaking them and saying, this is incredible. We need to talk about the fact that string manipulation is so cheap on Flow that we just do it and we don't even worry about it or have it's just a normal thing that you do. And on L2s, it's at least, it's viable. It's not like going to bankrupt you, but it's so expensive that people tend not to try to do those things. And so EVM and adding EVM is a way to create a bridge to the two most important things in the crypto industry. And the most important thing, and maybe this is another thing that maybe people argue with me on, but I believe that the most important thing in any industry and any tech particular is the builders. And by putting EVM on Flow, we can allow the majority of the builders in crypto, which we know is a very small number, it's fewer than 30,000, to build on our platform with what they already know and have a much better experience in terms of what's possible, what they can do. And we can provide avenues where, we have cross VM capabilities. So you can start with what you know, and then you can use our React SDK for front end. And that, without even writing any cadence, lets you start taking advantage of some cadence features. Like you can do batch transaction writes on Flow EVM entirely in TypeScript. And from there, you can start to add features to encourage your users to migrate to, a Flow compatible wallet. And then that lets you do things on EVM that can't be done on any other network. And then from there, you can expand functionality and features. And remember, we have a native bridge. So any asset that's on Flow EVM, you can bridge over to the Cadence side and back. And if you bridge it over to the Cadence side, you suddenly get like orders of magnitude better computation and storage. There's no arbitrary contract size limit in Cadence. There's a technical size limit of, I think, 2 megabytes compared to 24 kilobytes in Solidity. And even that isn't really like a designed limitation. It's more of like the ceiling is 100 feet in the air and most people are around 6 feet tall. We don't need to worry about anyone bumping their heads yet. And when we do, we can increase that. So you can move into that world at your time as it makes sense for you, but still build solidity and build with what you know. And then the other critical thing for this industry is, of course, the liquidity. And now with EVM, we're compatible with bridges to the other ecosystems and that liquidity. And so Axelar and Layer Zero, I believe, and a few other bridges now allow bridging of assets from other EVM equivalent or compatible networks to Flow. And so you can move those things over and get a much more secure network that's much better positioned to scale and really, really low gas prices without compromising all on security. Because with crypto is a lot like, in my opinion, like the rise of web applications, apps in your browser, which you're working in an environment that is much worse for some very specific advantages. And those advantages are so incredible that they outweigh the penalty. But there are disadvantages to building in crypto. Sometimes some networks, and I'm not going to name names or shame anyone, and everyone makes, business and technical compromises. There's never a perfect solution, but some networks are going so far into centralization and control for better performance that it's really like, well, why don't we just trust them to run an AWS instance for us and we'll put our data there, but it's extra steps, and it's not what crypto is for decentralized, and a business decision can't shut it down.
I like this trend of like interoperability between all of the different chains. I think it's very healthy. I think it makes sense. Yeah, I think there's like the Bitcoin maxis, they always say that the chain does the thing that it does well, which is manage money, right? Like a good store of value is good for paying huge amounts of money. There is a little bit of me that's pointed in that this is like the Coca-Cola, the main brand. There isn't any more effort put in to grow it. So ETH, Flow, and there's a whole bunch of different chains. I think Solana, even though it has downsides, I think there's benefits there. They are providing this beautiful web of different technology built like that. It's only possible kinds of permissionless environments, but it is a lot different than what it was when I joined. I've said this on this podcast before, but I joined the crypto world because I wanted to buy weed online. That was my entry point, and I was like a teenager, and I could just you basically buy weed, Bitcoin, and then Monero came out, and like I think this is the perfect example. There's this like centralization that happens time, especially if there's no pushback. So there hasn't been any pushback in Monero. I mean, at this point, there's I think one of the miners owns the whole network at this point, like 51%. So they could do anything they want with it at this point. And we just kind of have to trust that they won't, which is very disappointing. And not only that, I know this is like a bit of a tangent as well, but there were these reports that the government, like the United States, were paying all of the RPC providers for not all of them, but a lot of the RPC providers that are easily accessible, Monero, Kraken, all these exchanges, to get them. So because you can know who sent the money by knowing who hit the RPC, which is like, yeah, it's a centralized service you in the chain. So, and I think this is only getting more and more and more common as we go along. And we could see like this intermarriage between the government and all of these blockchain institutions. And I'm not sure where that's going. I remember the time where it was a big problem that there was no like legal clarity. Mitten, I don't know if you would be the one to answer this kind of question, but what is this situation at Flow? Like how does, because I know you guys work with a lot of U.S. operations, and the regulatory environment there is much complicated. And how is that working? Would you be able to share some of this information?
Well, I can share parts of it at least, and parts of it I don't know. But I mean, the biggest thing to remember is that, Flow is the nonprofit foundation that's responsible for the development and stewardship of the Flow blockchain network. And so the Flow Foundation does not work directly, with a lot of these big companies and brands. Dapper, the company that, the developer that builds these products and builds on Flow, is the one with the relationships and works with, they have a lot of, regulations and things that they have to adhere to, like everyone else in the industry. There's, and I don't know any of the details of this because I just, I don't work for Dapper and I don't work for that part. But, there's, the same as Coinbase where there's KYC rules, where there's certain circumstances you have to know who people are, and all kinds of other regulations like that with what you are and aren't allowed to do and what you are and aren't allowed to say. And parts of it is we need that. Like, the success and growth and moving forward in our society requires tension on both sides or on all sides of things. And it requires the right amount of tension, because too far in almost any direction leads to bad things, leads to problems, and this is for all of our political differences, when you talk one-on-one with people this, it's pretty easy to get them to agree to things like, you might have a different opinion on what the police should be allowed to do and shouldn't be allowed to do. But we can all agree if it's probably not a good idea for everyone to have a police officer assigned to their house who's walking around and looking at it all the time, right? That's too far in the extreme. And obviously, a comical one as an example, but it's this tension that helps keep us centered, not just as people and ourselves, but as a society. And so there are very big problems with centralization, but there's also huge advantages to it. Like Amazon works because they've been able to centralize so many things and have efficiencies at scale. But then there's also some potentially problematic things, either possible or in existence, with any one party having, so much influence or so much control. And so with things like regulations, we need rules. And if you want to see examples of what happens if there isn't that, look at and read about the history of the video game EVE Online, which has a fully in-game economy where everything that exists in the game was manufactured by players out of minerals that were mined by players. But this is also the only MMO that I've ever heard of where in the terms of service, you are explicitly allowed to scam other players. And one of the things that has happened several times in the history of this game and in this economy is people have looked up, hey, what's illegal stuff in the stock market and how does it work? How does a Ponzi scheme work? And then they do it in the game and they take advantage of people and they rob people. And so in something, that works for a game and it creates a fun and interesting environment. But, in a real world financial system that is supposed to be giving access to people to participate in the digital and worldwide economy that might not otherwise have it, like we need rules. We need to be able to say at some point, there's certain things that we've learned as a society, it's not good to be able to do. You shouldn't be allowed to do this kind of thing. But we have to figure out what that is because there's no roadmap and it is different. And, we've now got legislators who don't even use the internet trying to legislate crypto, but they have staffers who do, and they have people on their teams whose job is to help them understand these kinds of things. And, it's a balance that we need to figure out. And then with having multiple chains, it's the same kind of thing where there's too many is bad and too few is probably bad. What that number is, I don't know. It's probably greater than 1 and it's probably less than 20. But mostly what really needs to happen long term is, I always forget the number, but there's a prime number of internet backbone companies that are running the big parts of the internet that you and I are using to talk right now. And we don't know or care who those are. And it started with a bigger number and then it got to a smaller number and then some people added in and it's mostly settled. And I think that's probably some form of what's going to happen in crypto.
Yeah, it does seem like that pushback over the overexpansion of chains happening now. Like a lot of people are dissatisfied with it. I went to ETH Denver this year. You guys were there.
Yeah.
Just taking a step back, I heard, so you're in a bit of a educational position in DevRel and like history and what you probably see a lot of newer devs. How has, and you seem like you also AI yourself. I want to go into that topic. How's that been for you? What are you using it for? When did you start? What has the evolution for it been for you? And also from what you're seeing in terms of people that are interacting with the chain and the hackathons, the educational aspect.
I have to think for myself. I would say I started using it maybe the beginning of last year, maybe earlier. It's, as you know, or I don't know if you're embedded enough in the industry to know that like crypto years are like dog years. And I mean, like trying to think of last year is like trying to imagine almost a decade ago. But roughly a year, I started using it. I started using ChatGPT for help with programming things, and it slowly replaced using Google and Stack Overflow. Then used Copilot for a long time, and then was introduced to Cursor. And I primarily use Cursor now, although I got on my list of things to do to start dabbling with Claude, which is apparently incredibly expensive, but incredibly good. And we've got corporate access to it, which which helps. But it's almost the same problem that we have with getting people to adopt to Cadence, where it's like, I get that it's better, but how much better is it? Because my current workflow works really well.
Yeah, I would say, to sit on that for a minute, my current workflow is probably like I use AI a lot, and I've been late 2022 ever since GPT-3 came out. Point is like each one of these frontier models actually has like an advantage in something, and Claude is very good. Pay for max. I don't know if that's going to be the same forever, but right now it's like you just basically use it all day. And I track how much I pay. I pay $120 a month. I get $650 to $700 of credits. That's how much I'm using. And I use GPT-5, which I found to be very good. And I use a lot of the open models. But Cursor is great. I'm sorry for going on this. I wanted to share.
No worries at all. And I mean, you're probably right. And it's been, it goes both ways, where it's like I've had several of my friends who are programmers who are, established in what they're doing and kind of experts in what they do and don't feel like what they need. And I've had to grab them and say, like, no, stop it. Right now, what you are doing is you are jumping on this Google Meet and I'm sharing my screen and you're going to watch and see how I work with this. And every single one of them has been like, I apologize, you were right and I was wrong. I'm going to start using it now. And it's even funny where it's kind of like, it's almost like watching them grow up or something, where it's like, they go and they say, well, okay, well, I'll start asking ChatGPT some questions. It's like, oh, well, I've started, letting it finish lines for me and hitting tabs to like, yeah, this thing just wrote my whole test suite for me. And I had to go in and, fix a couple of things, but it's like, yeah, it's incredible.
Like for me, okay, so I track my health every exercise session, how much I eat, how much I weigh, pictures of myself. I track that all through, and I turn it into spreadsheet. My finances, my taxes, my law, what I want to do in the day, how I find books. Like it's my own personal algorithm for everything. Like I feed it everything I love, and it's just giving me good stuff that I've never tried before. And I it's been to recommend books and TV shows and places to go. I use it for coding. I just use it all the time. And I don't understand how people have this like gut reaction of it's not good. I don't get it. I don't get like, is it just like a lack of knowledge? Because what I see is like we have an extension of our brains and all the knowledge in the world inside of a computer, and you could just use it things. And I don't see why people don't share that vision with me, or maybe I'm just bad at explaining it.
Well, it takes time. It takes time for people to adopt, and there've been, we remember the things that stick and work, but then there's things that fall away and end up not being successful. And with this though, it's like this is just another tool in another place where things are cyclical. Like I remember. And I even, is a couple months ago now, but I even tweeted an example of like, I'm old enough to remember articles about how the existence of Google was trivializing a college education. And there was no point in going to college anymore because you could just Google everything, and that everyone is cheating by using Google. And it's this whole nightmare that's going to bring all of college to its knees. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely some problems with the idea that with what's happening with college. I used to think a degree is valuable, but there's some problems there. That is another rabbit hole we don't need to get into. But it's like, I'm old enough that when I was learning how to program in school, I was told and yelled at that, like, you must memorize all of this syntax and how to do these things. And if you can't, you're not a real programmer, because on the job, you're not going to have time and not going to have the ability to look up things. so it's really important that you memorize it all. And I'm like, that advice turned out to be about as accurate as the people who earlier told me that I wouldn't be carrying a calculator around my entire life. Turns out, uh, it turns out things are different. But like I taught at a university for a long time, and I didn't see it as a problem at all because I just simply gave my students the instructions that you are required to use Google and every available resource to you to do these assignments, to do these projects. And I simply turned up what I expected them to do in a given amount of time. And like with AI, it's the same thing now where it's just a tool. It's going to change how we work. It's going to make some things faster. It's going to make some jobs go away, and it's going to create some new jobs. But ultimately, it's just a tool. And some people will be faster to adapt to it, and some people will be slower. And that's the way that it's always been. And like, it's, I don't know, I guess bemusing is the right word for how I kind of see it. With, sometimes people in a variety of different ways get so excited about this, whether with a positive reaction or a negative reaction. It's like all of these things have happened before, we've done before. Any of the current topic on discussion on AI, I can pretty quickly, probably using AI, find you a parallel of something that's happened in the last 20 years or 30 years.
And where do you see things going next?
So again, it's a new cycle of a new thought process, and everyone will adapt to it and survive, or not adapt and find themselves not in the industry anymore. And newer people are going to have a fresher perspective and different habits. And it's just finding a balance for these things where, like, in ye olden days, there were definitely times where I find myself like trying different search phrases on the problem I'm running into on Stack Overflow. But I'm like, wait a minute, like, why am I doing this? I can just look at the code of the library and figure out how this works and then figure out the solution myself. Like, I don't need to be doing it this way. And ultimately, the answer is sometimes it is more efficient, or it was more efficient to try and find the answer on Stack Overflow because someone else has done it before. And sometimes it's not. And professional experience teaches you that. What I'm really learning with working with AI and sort of the process that you have to learn with it as a new skill for this new tool is that it's a lot like managing a junior dev on your team, a very fast, very smart junior dev that remembers a lot of things but doesn't really learn so well, unfortunately. And as with a junior dev, you need to figure out the right way to scope problems to give them for them to be successful or not. You need to figure out when it's appropriate to let them, to try and work with them and keep giving them further instruction to get them to do things the right way, versus when it's okay to just let them do it their way and it's, not that big of a deal. And either you can fix it yourself later or you can just ship it because, it's, in that window where it's like, yeah, it would be better if it was done this way, but, it meets the standards, it meets the expectations, and it meets the feature. When it's just that, like, there are times that the junior dev does something differently than you, and it's not wrong. It's just different. It's a different approach, a different style, and that's okay. And there's times where you need to step in and say, you know what? I'm sorry. This task is too much for you. I'm going to take over and I'm just going to do it. It's a skill that we need to develop and figure out. And there have definitely been times for me as well where I realized that, that I've been fighting with the AI to try to get it to do something the way that I want it to for an hour, that it would have taken me 10 minutes to type. But we wouldn't be programmers if, we're the kind of people who spend all day automating a task that takes 5 minutes. So
that's probably like the fundamental skill is make things go faster. Man, it's been really great hearing your story and like what you guys are working at Flow. Like I said, I've done 6 hackathons in my life. I've won 3 out of 6. I had won something. I don't do it often. I find it to be like a difficult and exhausting experience. But I think Flow had provided us good groundwork, good mentors. The docs were decent. There were enough. There was this one guy, that guy, I owe him my win. He's been, he really helped a lot. And he was one of the few people that I saw with a repo that uses Cadence that had ample documentation. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that person. But I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to like set these things up and provide a place for people to learn. Is there anything that you're excited about that you share before we wrap this up today?
Yeah, I think we talked about it, but just to sort of reiterate, I wouldn't be in crypto if I wasn't shilling something from time to time. But to shill the most, exciting updates is in Forte, our October upgrade to the network. We're adding the ability for you to write loops that run effectively forever, which opens up all kinds of things that aren't possible on any other network. And we're working on actions which do the same thing for DeFi that NFTs did for digital collectibles. And it's both opportunities to get on the cutting edge and build brand new things that can't exist anywhere else on any other crypto network or outside of it. And, this is just the beginning. It's 1993. In 1993, there were 30,000 web developers, and now there's 30 million. Right now, there's about 30,000 crypto developers. And this is the chance to be at the forefront of a tidal wave. So we're doing a lot of activations, and we're continuing to do them. A few months ago, after Permissionless 4, we did a really cool hackathon or buildathon called PL Genesis. And in that, we had, I think, almost $450,000 of investment in the Flow ecosystem in different projects, including some projects getting reasonably significant chunks of funding and access to the beginnings of venture capital and mentorship for how to build companies out of it. And we've got, I should know the name of it, but it's escaping me. But in the next few weeks, we've got something similar that's launching. That's a online activation to be able to build and get help. There's avenues to get funding, and we'll also be launching our next round of Grant DAO for our Always On Grants program in the next few weeks.
You guys should look into Thrive as well. That's where I work, so a bit of plug. We manage, we manage basically funding for different companies. We work with Polygon and Optimism and a whole bunch of different chains.
Nice. I'll pass that on to my colleague Ali, that manages that part of our cluster.
I think it would be cool. We have like a developer pool. I don't get anything saying this, but thank you again so much for time to do this. I'm gonna add all the links in the description, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great, and I'll DM you a few links, and thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.